So there are a few last slides here that give an update on how the law is actually being implemented, the progress that's been made since it was signed into law. 4 major rules are due a year after enactment, that is in June of 2017. One sets up this prioritization process, another the process EPA will use to do risk evaluations. The third one has to do with this update or the resetting of the inventory. And then finally, a rule that establishes how EPA will collect the fees that I mentioned earlier. These ambitious deadlines of being all put in place within a year of enactment are a hallmark of the law, and I think a clear signal from Congress that it intended a new system to get up and running quickly. There are some other major parts of the law that immediately took effect the day it was signed. One has to do with the way that EPA reviews new chemicals coming into the market, establishing this requirement of an affirmative safety finding as a condition for getting onto the market. And the other has to do with the review of CBI claims that EPA now has to undertake. Those are immediately effective, and EPA is implementing those as called for by the law. And then a science advisory committee was required to be established within a year of enactment that is aimed at giving EPA expert advice on how to address science issues associated with implementing the new TSCA. EPA is also undertaking some specific actions on particular chemicals, proposing restrictions on the use of trichloroethylene and 2 chemicals in paint strippers where its risk assessments have found excessive risk, initiating risk evaluations on 10 chemicals within 6 months of enactment, and these are likely to include chemicals like the flame retardants that I mentioned earlier. And once EPA identifies a chemical as subject to a risk evaluation, the first thing it has to do is determine the scope of that evaluation. What uses of the chemical, what risks is it going to consider, and which populations is it concerned about and needs to examine. And that scope also decides the scope of any preemption of state authority that attaches to that risk evaluation. So it's a really critical step in the process. So in sum, I think what we are on the verge of is what I'd like to think of as a paradigm shift. Under the old TSCA, EPA basically faced the situation where unless it had firm evidence of harm, it was to assume safety and not even be able to test chemicals in order to determine whether they in fact posed a risk. What's needed, and I believe the new law sets us in the direction of achieving, is a paradigm that requires companies to provide data to EPA and requires EPA to determine affirmatively whether chemicals are safe or not, and that be done both for existing chemicals already on the market as a condition for them to stay on the market, and for new chemicals as a condition to get market entry. There are some websites I'll leave you with here that give you much more information about the new law and some of the ways in which we are interpreting its meaning, and I'll leave it at that. And thank you very much.